Hi, Walt. It is a delight to welcome you today, Walt Hampton. Lovely to speak to you.
So nice to be here, and thank you for the gift and the privilege of being able to spend this time with you and with those who are listening to us.
Mm. Now, what I do is I slightly turn this around on its head, and instead of telling everyone how marvelous I know that you are, I would love you to tell us what you do and what really still floats your boat as far as the work that you do, which is exceptional out there.
Well, thank you. I'm a legend in my own mind, which gets me very far. My work for the last 17 years has been as an executive coach and consultant. And the work that really floats my boat is helping people discover the work that floats their boat and create it or recreate it. My sweet spot is helping folks who have been in work that has not lit them up, that has not brought them joy, and to help them take their backgrounds and experiences and create their next chapter, their exciting fourth act, that new iteration of who they are in the world. Because I think that joy is our birthright, and way too many people are living lives, if not a quiet desperation, at least um, quiet despondency, and they're not finding the joy that is theirs to have. And so that's what lights me up and keeps me going and gets me up every morning.
I think, who was it that said that line? Most people live lives of
That was
quiet desperation.
that was Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau.
It's an amazing line, isn't it?
Yes,
Just
yes.
because I've watched you, I guess, for maybe a couple of years now. And for the people that are listening to this, Walt is an incredibly dynamic uh, tour de force in a really lovely way. And has a huge heart. So it's lovely to just spend some time with you because I think there are very few people who live from what I call the inside out. So they're very, I really like this word, they're really congruent.
Thank you.
Um, and what I'd love you to do before we start the topic is you've written some amazing books which are really clever. And they're clever because you're experienced enough to know exactly what you're doing, having probably not known to begin with. And they're clever because you know right from the beginning, if you're kinesthetic, when you pick up one of your books, it's not overwhelming and it feels manageable, which is really, really clever. And what we're going to talk about when you just tell us the names of a couple of your books, because I think they're really relevant to what we're going to talk about. In the winter, it's very easy, the winter season, when we need as human beings to be hibernating and kind of slowing up and getting more sleep and resting and consolidating. We sort of we need to go back to being the bulbs in the earth when there's darkness and silence. And in fact, what we're all forced to do is just sort of rush around, behaving as if there's no change in the seasons and as if we can outwit Mother Nature, which is very dangerous. And so I have enormous amounts of people at the moment who, if you give them a chance and they feel safe enough, they will actually tell you how anxious they feel and how overwhelmed and how unmanageable their lives are, which is why I mentioned your books, because right from the get-go, if you want to order Walt's books, they're just, you pick them up and they're manageable. They're not like just for a second. Somebody, I'm going to deliberately, because it's not kind on the author, I'll take the cover off. But I was given this book for Christmas, okay? And someone has spent an enormous amount of time writing this. And you open it, and the writing is very, very, very small. And it's too congested. And I promise you, I've several times I've opened it and I've immediately just shut it. It's too overwhelming in the world that we live in now. So will you please tell us, what are a couple of your books that you could recommend? And you can even recommend some of your darling wives.
So thank you for that. And I think you observe something that's absolutely true, that there is a lot of anxiety and overwhelm in the world, and that reduces our capacity to consume, to attend even to small things. And so while there is great literature out there and wonderful books that are in fact tomes, our capacity generally as human beings right now, and maybe especially in the winter, is diminished. So you bestow accolades that perhaps are too kind, because when I wrote Journeys on the Edge, Living a Life That Matters, I knew nothing really about writing or being clever around books. But Journeys on the Edge is my core message about living richly, fully, here, now, before the clock runs out. And I wrote the book as a very, it has themes throughout it, but they are very short essays meant to deliver particular lessons along the way. And if you were to look at the arc of my work, the arc of my messaging over decades, Journeys still contains the core of the work I do. And maybe 10 years after I wrote Journeys, I wrote The Power Principles of Time Mastery: Do Less, Make More, and Have Fun. And that was more or less a response to, okay, you've written this book, Journeys on the Edge. I want to figure out how I can have the bandwidth to even begin to have a life that makes sense, that is grounded, that is present, that matters, and that lights me up. And so The Power Principles of Time Mastery was a response to those questions from my audience, saying, well, how do I even enter into this space? And the first chapter is entitled Do Less.
I'm deliberately just letting that kind of sink in, because part of the wonderment of beginning to live seasonally is actually getting into the habit of the rhythms that nature invites us to. And doing less is absolutely it's the prime sort of tiny sentence. And I'm constantly saying, I've done some posts about it, and the theme is less is more.
Yes.
And the subject that you and I are going to talk about is going to be around how anxious making modern life is now. And
there is so much coming at us all of the time, Catherine. As you know, emails, text messages, notifications, alerts, doom scrolling through the news, the onslaught of social media, the sense that we're missing out on what everybody else is doing and hearing and knowing. And it is just the sheer volume of noise and distraction that comes at us all of the time is exhausting and anxiety provoking. And on top of that, there are real issues that are anxiety provoking. Even though in the United States here, the economy seems to be improving. Folks don't feel really confident about it. We have a high level of political rancor in many, many countries. We have so many wars and conflicts going on right now, and the threat of more. And so you mentioned this earlier, that there's a lot of objective things that we can get anxious about. And if we're anxious about it, they're not without reason. And really what that then begs is, how can we lean into that anxiety and to befriend it so that we can take its power away from us?
And I think really hope you don't mind me outing you about this. If so, we won't post this, but you are an incredibly disciplined man, and you begin your days with practices that I believe really feed you. So would you like to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's, even though all of us need to choose different practices, I think it's a really inspiring thing to share what does work for you, Walt.
Yeah, thank you. Years ago, I was at a workshop listening to a very accomplished entrepreneur who at the time was making $12 million a year in dog agility training. And she said, the secret to my success is I claim the first 5 hours of the day for myself. Oh, huh. Wonder what that would be like. I still, after, that was probably a decade ago that I listened to her. I maybe claim the first 4 hours of the day for myself. I get up around 4:30 in the morning and sit in quiet. I have a journaling practice that's very much akin to Julia Cameron's morning pages, where it's 3 stream of consciousness pages that you just journal out. It's a practice I've done for 30 years, every single day. Julia, in her book, The Artist's Way, said it's a little bit like flushing the toilet of the mind. And it just moves the things through you and out. One of the things that happens for many of us who, are thinkers and thoughtful, is that all of this stuff gets caught up in our heads. And by moving it from our heads onto a piece of paper, it releases it. And over time, you can begin to see the repetitions, the worries, the anxieties, the things that preoccupy us, and it allows it to be released, or at least to be recognized. And when we're able to name something and identify it, it gives us some power and control over it. And so that journaling practice has been key for me for many, many decades. The second practice is a meditation practice. And again, going back 25 or 30 years, a daily meditation practice and a simple breath meditation practice. You can get apps and all sorts of programs and stuff, but this is a Vipassana practice. Was brought to the West by Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg back in the 60s. A very simple breath meditation for 20 minutes a day. And when I'm teaching this at workshops, I'll often bring one of those old holiday snow globes and shake it up where all the flakes begin to move around, and then put it on the lectern, and the flakes begin to settle. And that's the gift of meditation over time, is that the flakes, all of those flakes begin to settle, and we're able to see with greater clarity. And that's a tremendous gift. What it does is it really reduces reactivity over time. And there's actually great brain science around that. 6 weeks, 5 minutes a day for 6 weeks of a simple breath meditation will decrease cortisol levels, decrease inflammation, increase focus, increase clarity, and actually within months, re-engineer the expression of our genes as to how we actually show up in the world. And so the meditation practice is super important. And then my third practice, which again goes back as long as I can remember now, is getting out and moving my body. I'm a runner. You don't have to run, but getting outside, getting out, even for tax, especially. I am living right now, for those who are listening to this, in the Northeast of the United States, where the run today was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that would be in centigrade, but it's cold. But still getting outside, feeling the warmth of the sun, even though the air is cold, and moving, getting the body moving every single day, getting the body moving every single day, or at least getting outside and getting some sunshine makes a huge difference. And so those practices are non-negotiable practices for me. And you're right. I mean, different people can have different practices, but it's, comes under the umbrella of self-care. We cannot take care of others. We cannot show up in the world unless we're taking care of ourselves.
No. And I mean, that's what's amazing about spending time with you and Anne, is that you both are very congruent.
Yes.
You're, and I think when people when they really have a handle on what it is to care for yourself, then you're, and it's something that I don't think we talk enough about, we're sort of inside ourselves. So one of the things I used to do with patients in clinical practice is, after I'd been with them already for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours, I would invite them to undress to a certain level, and then get on a treatment couch, get under a blanket. And I would leave the room, and then I'd knock on the door and I'd say, can I come in? And they would go, yes. And then I'd go up to them, and they would have had a relatively, hopefully, enjoyable time with me. And they would have been asked all sorts of questions that in itself actually sort of piqued their interest about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would quite deliberately, and I was trying to do this to a certain extent, I would actually say the first question I'd ask when I came in, so I'd be shifting the energy, and I'd go, where are you?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them would go, you could almost see the ticker tape going, what does she mean? I'm here in front of her. I thought I was beginning to trust her. And then just occasionally a few of them, but the point about this story is that the few that said, oh, okay, I'm not quite here, am I?
Mm-hmm.
They understood because of the practices, whether it was they ran, they walked, they journaled, they took time for themselves, they listened to music. The ones who got where I was coming from were the ones that were truly engaged
Mm-hmm.
in a relationship with themselves. Yes. And they understood the importance, because most of us now, if we're not careful, we're not inside our bodies. And I don't know quite why, but a few times recently in the last few weeks, just a bit like your journaling, I observe when themes are coming up in my life, and I pay attention to them, and I listen to what it is I say, even if other people aren't listening to me. And in the last few weeks, I've ended up telling just a few people, rather bizarrely, that I've had this extraordinary privilege of dying and sort of being above my body and watching as these sort of plays took place around me. And then for whatever reasons, I've come back into my body. Now, you just have to have that happen once, and I've had it several times. You become really aware that we are a spirit. We are, and I'm not going to be going into religion right now, but we are mind, body, and spirit. And I personally believe, and I'd love to know your opinion, it's those self-care practices that get deeper and deeper that allow us to have a relationship with the most powerful aspect of ourselves, which is our spirit, our essence, which
No
is
question.
not our bodies,
Paul
but it
Tillich,
feeds our bodies.
Paul Tillich calls it getting in touch with the ground of all being.
Yeah.
But what that requires is for us to come to ground, for us to be able to be present in our bodies in the moment. And it's only through that that we can touch the ground of all being, which is this thing that's greater than ourselves.
It's a sort of coming home.
Oh, no question about it.
And I think, going back to the high levels of anxiety, it's like on the one hand, the winter energy. In Chinese medicine, the winter is connected and associated with our kidneys and our bladder, which gives us the capacity to emotionally feel fear. And one of the most dangerous energy types that people can be out there is what we call lack of fear. So it's the person that will hang upside down with a what do you call them? A chainsaw, and the family will be completely traumatized every day this man goes out to work. But for him, it will be enormous fun. But because it's fun and he has a lack of fear, he won't necessarily take the precautions. And I think in today's society, we need to be allowed to come home and start relishing our capacity to feel our feelings, including feeling frightened, in order to be able to do something about it.
Yes.
I mean, it's yours and my practices that alert us almost before other people, that something's off.
Yes.
And that we need to pay attention.
Yes. Feel the feels.
Yeah. So I think it's, in business and in our relationships and in the amazing things that we can choose to do with our lives, we do have to have an alert system. And we need to pay attention to that anxiety, but we can actually start learning to manage it.
Yes.
So what would you say to the people listening to this who maybe are feeling totally overwhelmed at the moment and slightly kind of panicky? What would be the first 3 steps that you would say could work to just begin to switch down that anxiety or transform it, do something about it?
Years ago, when my kids were growing up and they were out in the world as young boys, and the teachers would tell them, we're going to take you out on a hike, and if you get lost, just stop where you are and hug a tree. One of the very first things we need to do is stop, because we're out there lost in the woods, panicking. Stop. The very first thing is to stop. And to get quiet, to be still. And that would be the most important first step. And the second step would be how we talk to ourselves in that moment. We often are kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. And so to give ourselves some grace, some degree of slack, that it's okay that I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. And the third thing might be very much related to the first two is to rest. Sleep is like the best tonic. Rest, just rest. You know, I am a distance runner, but it's axiomatic in athletics. If you want to get stronger, if you want to go farther, rest. And so, you know, it's a little paradox. This is what I'm saying. Those steps are a little countercultural because we're told, you know, suck it up, double down, and keep moving. I'm saying just the opposite. Don't suck it up. Stop, drop, and rest.
It was your darling wife who cleverly chose the name of the book that she had transformed brilliantly, The Pain Paradox. And you know, the deeper we go into our lives, the more we realize that I think everything is a paradox. And you cannot go forward unless you're willing to rest more. And you cannot stop and be still until you actually interchange the bully that most of us have in our lives inside ourselves to someone that's loving and cherishing. We have a culture now that's, we're kind of constantly searching out there for somebody to love us, but the person we're missing is ourselves.
Yes, no question.
So, it's very interesting being in clinical practice for so long. You very quickly got the hang of nobody's going to stop and meet themselves if they have a really messed up relationship with themselves.
Correct.
And there's nothing to be ashamed of. But one of the most useful tips that I think you and I can share giving to other people is how transformational it is if you have a good look in the mirror and go, what is my relationship with myself?
Mm-hmm.
Am I constantly tripping myself up in the illusion that something out there is stopping me? Or is it in fact my relationship with myself?
The great Brene Brown says that we tell ourselves the story. If we stay busy enough, the truth of our lives won't catch up with us.
Yep. Well, one of the things I'd like to kind of say just as we close, we keep these podcasts really short so that people don't get overwhelmed. But we're going to put the links of how to contact you, because I really like to recommend that, men and women who really want to do that next layer of getting their act together as far as their own life choices are concerned. If you really want a very dynamic coach, then get a hold of Walt, but do not do it unless you mean business.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the recommendation and the caveat.
Yeah. No, well, it's a very high praise.
Yes. And hashtag truth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I was looking at the work that you and I did and some of the Summit Success forms, and it's very succinct. So, and I think it's really important to just, I guess, end this particular chat with reminding people that where you're at is okay. But if you want to go further, then there are amazing people who will actually hold your hand. And there won't be patronizing, there won't be shaming, there won't be bullying, they'll be challenging, they'll be dynamic, they'll be inspirational. But there are people out there who can really have your back. And you and Anne are two bright lights out there that have put the work in for years and years and years. And I'm sure that your huge, phenomenal success didn't come overnight, and that it's okay. It's okay for people who are at the beginning of their journeys, and maybe it's taking longer than they wanted, or whatever it is, it's okay.
And Catherine, I just want to not be remiss and just deeply honor the work, the important work that you do in the world. It changes so many lives. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, dear Walt. And just stay with me for a second when I start recording so that I can actually properly say goodbye to you. And please, anyone that's listening to this, go to the links below, and Walt's books are available, and they're really clever, and they're worth please downloading or getting.